Hello, everyone. Welcome to their Spiritual Spotlight series. Today, I am joined by Tracy Inscore. She is an attorney turned energy healer, specializing in helping other lawyers and high stress professionals recovering from burnout. She is also a certified emotional freedom technique tapping practitioner, which is quite amazing that you do that. Tracy, thank you so much for coming on the Spiritual Spotlight series.
Thank you for having me, Rachel. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. I love people that do EFT. I think it's such a transformative modality that I think a lot of people aren't quite aware of. But let me ask you this question. So your transition from attorney to energy healer is nothing short of extraordinary. Can you maybe share what catalyzed this monumental shift in your career?
Sure. So I do still practice law part-time, in addition to working in my practice. But basically, I felt compelled down this path because of my own burnout. So probably about just 5 years into practicing law, I really hit a wall. I was severely depressed, anxious, binge drinking, and no one knew how much I was struggling. On the outside, I looked like I had it all together. Was a top performer and represented one of the largest companies in the world, and outwardly was thriving. So then I felt like a total imposter too, because my outer reality was so different from my inner world.
Yeah.
So after about 5 years, I just left full-time practice, took a six-figure pay cut as a result, and went in-house. I was a law professor for a while as well. Um, uh, Continued to practice part-time. I was even a fitness instructor. And what I learned was that burnout is never really about the job, because I
Mm,
managed to I managed to burn out doing all those other more fun things too. I thought it was the full-time law practice that was the problem. It wasn't. I was the problem. It was the energy that I brought into anything that I did. My marriage, relationships, didn't matter what it was. I would overperform, overfunction. So it really was a pattern within me. And the burnout was just a symptom of these much deeper issues that, I started off on a long path, a long healing path of addressing those. And I discovered EFT, was blown away at how effective it was, and just knew that I needed to bring this to fellow lawyers, especially.
I find it very interesting that it sounds like you were a high functioning professional, but like you said, you were struggling internally. Did you have a moment where you're like, and then I know you still work part time as a lawyer. Did you have a moment where you're like, this isn't working anymore?
Yeah, I felt like something was wrong with me. I would look around and think like, this seems to be coming so easily to everyone else. Maybe this just wasn't the right career path for me. Maybe I just can't cut it as a lawyer. Um, and so I definitely did sort of blame my choice of profession at the
Mm.
time. But I've come to find out the job really wasn't the issue. It was a lot of, like I said, deeper inner stuff that I needed to work on.
And I like the fact that you recognize that it wasn't the job. Like, right now I'm a registered nurse, I manage a doctor's office. And even though it's a high stress job, I know that my stresses come from within. Like, what are the stories that I tell myself? What is the false narrative that I have? What is the energy? Like on the way home today, even I was like, okay, gotta cleanse my energy. This was not the best day. Like, and I really like the way, because sometimes I do think it's in my job that's burning me out, but I like the fact that you're like, no, it's internal things that you need to look at and address, as a human to kind of help you step forward in your life. I like that you put it that way. It's a refreshing perspective.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and that's not to minimize that where we spend most of our waking hours in our job, of course, can affect us. And of
Yeah, of
course,
course.
certain jobs are inherently more stressful. But if it's not working for you for any period of time, you have to ask, okay, why am I still here then? What hidden payoff am I getting from this? Or why am I stuck in this pattern?
Yeah.
And then once we, sort of work through those deeper issues, you can make a decision whether to stay or go with clarity, rather than it being a knee-jerk reaction of just, I cannot take it one more day.
Yeah.
We don't want to leave a job from that energy because we'll just carry those same problems with us into the next role, into the next position.
100%. And it's also not even like with your job, it's also part of relationships and family and everything, what we carry into. It's interesting. So one aspect of your journey that really stands out in your early life was being raised in a religious cult until you were 10 years old. How was that unique upbringing influence your approach to healing in your career?
Oh, it completely. So yeah, until I was about the age of 10, we were part of a doomsday cult, for a lack of a better term, very fear-based, high control religion. I remember being told, like, meditation, for example, not okay. Being told that you should never let your mind go blank for even 1 second because the devil could take it over, stuff like that, right?
Oh,
Like,
wow.
being taught that you are not even safe in your own mind. Um, Constantly hearing about, the end of days and rapture and the end of the world and all that. It was, stressful for a kid. They they promoted really harsh corporal punishment for kids, at one point even passing out like wooden paddles at the services to be used on the kids.
Oh my
And
gosh.
my dad had kind of a temper. So that wasn't a good combo because he was then able to sort of take his frustrations out on me in the name of, well, the church says that this is what I
Yeah.
should be doing. So I was probably, well into my 30s before I realized just the toll that that took on my nervous system and
Absolutely.
how that had me in a constant state of hypervigilance and uh, fight or flight, really. And so, um, in a way, I'm grateful for that experience and that it taught me to question everything,
Mm.
made me very sensitive and perceptive to any sort of like mind control or manipulation tactics, which has served me well, not just as a lawyer, but over the past few years, just in society in general.
So
Um,
true.
right? Like, to be aware of fear propaganda. And um, so yeah, I can appreciate it for that. But
Hmm.
really, it's just caused me in my own work now. I don't really like to use the term healer because that's implying that the power is outside of us, when
Yeah.
really everything we need is within us. And I think that's one of the greatest lies that we've been taught, is that that love is outside of us, or God or our power is something outside of us, when really, I see myself more of a teacher,
Mm.
helping people to access their own power, their own healing. Um, and the term energy healing is kind of funny. It's like kind of redundant if you think about it, because everything's energy, right? So it's just
Right.
healing.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I mean, I myself, I am certified in a couple different energy healing modalities, but you're 100% correct that we're just facilitators, helping people, but ultimately you have to choose yourself whether or not you really want to step forward and heal yourself. And 100% you are so correct about everything is within. And it's interesting that up until the age of 10, like to be raised in that fear type of environment and to be able to break through that, then become a lawyer, and then now what you do, like what a path. Like that's very fascinating. Like, and it's amazing that you're positive. You know what I mean? Like you could have completely done something so different. Sorry, I'm having a moment.
Yeah, no, if you had met me 8 years ago, I mean, I was a very different person.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to me how we tend to recreate our childhood
Mm,
experiences until we've, fully processed and healed them. And so, because of that upbringing, and, I was also an only child, and then my parents got divorced. So I had to navigate a lot just on my own. And academic achievement was the one thing that I could,
the dogs
rely
are playing with
on.
you.
I'm surprised my cat's not in here. That's fine. Um, it was a way that I could make sure I got my needs met, a way to make
Yeah.
sure that no one was upset with me, to keep people happy with me. So it really was like the perfect storm for burnout later
Mhm.
in life. Um, and yeah, so it's just those,
That's yeah, that's a lot. So let me ask you this. So you specialize in helping lawyers and high stress professionals. What do you think makes these professions particularly vulnerable to burnout?
yeah, I've noticed, not to fall into lawyer stereotypes, because obviously we're all unique
Different, yeah.
individuals. Yeah, but we tend to have certain personality traits in common, that overachiever, um, type A,
Mm,
super ambitious. And those are all really great qualities to have. That's what you want in your lawyer, right? You want them
absolutely.
to, yeah, to advocate for you and to be on the ball. Um, and I think because we're required to be so analytical, so in our heads, it really
Mm,
can cause that mind body disconnect. Like, I remember the first time a therapist asked me, well, like, where do you feel that emotion within your body? And I just kind of looked at her like, my
like
emotions
checking
are
out.
in my head. Like, what do you mean? Where do I feel?
So
And
you had to learn how to really feel into your body. Oh
I
wow.
did.
That's
Yeah, no,
interesting.
for a lot of us, I think we learn how to turn off our own bodily cues.
Mm,
We learn to kind of, because we have to sort of separate our own personal feelings a lot of times from our client's position, or the cause, the case we're working on. We may not, we might have to fight for positions we don't necessarily agree with.
yeah. That's
And
gonna
so
be
we
it's almost like you disassociate.
definitely,
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely an element of that.
That's interesting. Wow. I'm having a moment with you today. I mean, it's interesting to like think about it, but you're right. You almost have to like take yourself out of your body to be present with your client and then to have to pull yourself back into your body, feel into it, truly like, like maybe in peace or, to meditate. I wonder like when you were first kind of transitioning your path a little bit, how was that, like, shift in your mind and in your body?
It definitely took a long time. I started by just meditating, and could not quiet my thoughts. And
Mm,
so I would listen to guided meditations, and then I would just fall asleep. And I
you do that
realize
still?
now, yeah, you know, I realize now that I was still getting a benefit from it. And every time I at least caught myself slipping back into those thoughts, that it was working. That's the whole point of meditation, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it really wasn't until I discovered EFT.
Mm,
I'm embarrassed to say that I heard about it probably 2 years before I tried it, because I thought, oh, that's just too good to be true, or like I just dismissed it.
yeah.
And finally, one day, tried it just watching a YouTube video,
Mm,
and was just blown away. And so that, over the past couple years, has been the biggest thing to really um, yeah, help me get back into my body, and out of my head, out of my own way.
that is perfect. So let me ask you this. Can you share an example of how the emotional freedom techniques, tapping, helps in the nervous system regulation and subconscious reprogramming?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, get ready for me to nerd out, because I
Here we
really,
go.
I love this stuff. So, EFT involves tapping on certain meridian points in a specific sequence while we focus on a particular memory or problem. So it's based in traditional Chinese medicine, and it centers around that core premise that everything is energy, that
Mm,
all negative emotion, and physical issues too, are caused by energy blockages within the body.
mhm.
And so, you may have heard the sayings like our issues are stored in our tissues, or
Yes.
our biography becomes our biology. The body keeps the score. It's kind of like the micro level of the Akashic records, right? Just for this life experience.
So true.
And so the meridian system is like an energetic highway running through the body, and tapping allows us to like restore the proper flow of traffic to that highway.
Mm,
Um, And so really traditional Chinese medicine and the practice of acupuncture were way ahead of their time thousands of years ago in identifying the meridian system, which really corresponds to the nervous system as we know it, or as we're really just beginning to fully understand in modern Western medicine.
Mhm.
Um, and so most of us are familiar with that meridian system because of acupuncture, which involves placing needles at certain points
Mhm.
along the meridians. There's like 12 main meridians. Each one corresponds to a specific part of the body. Um, and so EFT has been clinically proven effective in treating anxiety, PTSD. And when we tap, it actually sends calming signals to the amygdala in the brain, which calms the nervous system and gets us out of that chronic fight or flight state. And so this is so important because in terms of the communications between our brain and our body, about 80% is going from our body to our brain, and only about 20% is going from our brain to our body.
Mm.
And so, and likewise, you may have heard that around 90% of our brain activity is subconscious.
Yes.
So, and our subconscious mind is constantly taking direction from our nervous system as far as what feels safe. So that's why we can say all of the positive affirmations and do traditional talk therapy and think we've moved on from a situation or a trauma, and yet still be stuck because knowing something and feeling something are two very different things.
Yeah.
So if the body never gets the message that it's safe, then it's going to be reactivated every time that thing comes up, right? We've all felt that emotional charge that comes up when we think about something that really hurt us or that, fear. So, instead of exerting all this energy to address the cognitive or the 10 to 20%, when we direct our energy to that 80 to 90% where the root cause issues actually are, that's where we start seeing the lasting change. So when we engage the body, the nervous system, and the subconscious mind while we're sending these signals of safety throughout the body, which is basically what the tapping is doing, that allows us to actually process our emotions and to truly process those past experiences.
And also, like you're saying, to pull it out of the cellular tissue of your body. And then when you pull it out, it also does it help you to not have to have the same emotional reaction if something like that were to happen again.
Oh, exactly, because it's sort of like closing an open wound that
Mm,
was super painful anytime you touched it.
yeah.
So we kind of just deactivate it. So it's not like you forget, um, but it's just not that pain point
Yeah.
anymore the way it was.
That's very powerful. Like you hear about EFT and like you said, you learned about it 2 years prior before you started doing it. It's not a hard practice like to tap. You know what I mean? Like I think the scripting can be difficult. That's where I've always gotten stuck. But it's so interesting that, like no, this helps release the issues from the tissues. And then for you to really feel more empowered and then to not have the same like, oh, like emotional reaction to a situation that truly empowers you to move forward in your life.
Exactly. Exactly.
I love that. So let me ask you this. So your work is particularly impactful because you delve into family of origin influences and subconscious programming. Could you maybe give us a glimpse of what decoding unique burnout archetype pattern looks like?
Oh, yes, this is my favorite thing. So
Yes.
yeah, so when we talk about these sort of deeper issues, this might include things like a lack of alignment,
Mm,
and which can be draining in itself. Like if you're pretending to be someone you're not, or if you're living in conflict with your core values, or your priorities, um, it could be the subconscious beliefs that you learned in your family around money or how hard you have to work, that things aren't allowed to be easy. So just, using my own example, going back to what I said about sort of recreating those childhood
yeah.
experiences, it's kind of funny how I went from a religious upbringing with a ton of rules, really high consequences, or high stakes, sort of severe consequences, if
Yeah.
you will, and kind of recreated that in going into the legal profession, where again, lots of laws to follow, lots of rules, really
Lots of
high standards.
consequences.
Yeah. For other people, it maybe in their family of origin, they had to be a caretaker from
Mm,
a really young age, or they were like a parentified child, and their burnout pattern might revolve around caregiving and caretaking and the early messages that that's how they earned their worth and value within the family. Um, and so when I'm working with a client, what we really focus on is the feeling.
mm.
So we'll take whatever's bothering them the most. Let's say it's a really critical or micromanaging boss. And that's the issue they come in, they're presenting with, right? We really identify the feeling, and then we try to trace that back to when was the first time you remembered feeling that way.
Oh,
And
interesting.
nine times out of 10, it will relate to usually a parent figure, sometimes another, significant authority figure from
Mm,
childhood who made them feel like I can't do anything right. And once it's just so cool to see once they realize that and we're able to clear that childhood stuff,
mm.
not only does the boss not bother them as much, but because you know how this stuff works, the boss will actually start responding differently because then
So
their
true.
energy, their energy
Yes.
has changed. So
That's 100% correct. Like it is interesting. As soon as you shift the energy, anyone that you're around is going to meet you where you're at. And it's almost like, we talk about being this is a little bit off topic, like having an attitude of gratitude. And when you raise your vibration to be more grateful for things, then more things open up to come to you in your life. Like I love that. I love
it's
energy.
universal law. Yeah, it's as within, so without, and it's not woo woo. It's actually physics.
100%, like forget spirituality. Like it's almost like, when you see people in victim mindset, oh, my life is so
Exactly.
terrible, oh, blah 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 blah, and you're like, come on, like you're going to attract those things from the universal law, like you just said. If you're putting it out, well, guess what, you're going to get back. Like, and
Yes.
you sit there and you're like, guys. Guys, so let me ask you this. So you still practice law part-time while focusing on healing. How do you manage to balance these contrasting roles, and do you find that one complements the other?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. So first of all, I use EFT myself on myself, and I meet with a practitioner every week. We trade sessions
I
to
love that.
help because this, starting a business and still practicing, it is demanding. So I have
Yeah.
to practice what I preach. But I'm doing this with my clients. Like I do this to prevent my own burnout tendencies that
Yeah.
could come back up if I'm not careful. They definitely do complement each other. I think that still practicing allows me to better relate to my attorney clients because they
Mm,
know that I'm still doing this day in and day out just as they are. And I definitely think, conversely, it's made me a much more empathic and sensitive and intuitive attorney because I've been able to access those parts of myself a lot more and bring that into my work. And the response from my colleagues has just been overwhelming, with their support and their interest in this and wanting help and wanting to use this and to try it.
that's amazing. So let me ask you this. I know that you do one-on-one clients, and you also have a new program that's coming out. Can you tell the listeners about all of the amazing stuff you have coming?
Of
Or can do
course.
now?
Of course, yes. So I would love to work with you. And so if you're, and I don't just work with lawyers, so
Anyone, honestly.
anyone dealing with burnout, I offer free burnout strategy sessions, and you can schedule that on my website, which is tapoutburnout.com. And specifically for law students, I realized that has been an overlooked area of when attorney burnout actually starts. It doesn't start after 5 or 10 years of practice. The seeds are really planted in law school. And so I not only offer discounted rates for any law student,
Oh,
but I
that's
have a new
amazing.
program. I have a new program called Bar and Beyond, which focuses on the months leading up to the bar exam, uh, and up through the first few months of practice and getting those bar exam results, because that 6 month period is one of the most intense and stressful times. And I find that if we don't address the stress, then it can just kind of bleed over into the rest of our professional life. So I really want to help give a good foundation and teach these skills early on so that people can use this throughout their career.
I love that title, Bar and Beyond. That's
Thank
amazing.
you.
And I love the fact that you're targeting students because you're right. I think it is probably a missed population and it's a missed opportunity to maybe help people that can be amazing lawyers that maybe give up the profession because they get burnt out. That's phenomenal. So again, I love your website. Anyone that's interested in checking out Tracy, it's tap out burnout .com. I'm looking at it, I'm like, I love this website. So Tracy, thank you so much for coming on the Spiritual Spotlight series. It was a pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you, Rachel.